I'm Pierre-Olivier Pineau. I'll be moderating this fireside chat with Fatih Birol and François-Philippe Champagne, sorry. I have the difficult task of moderating the first panel after the lunch, when either you will always want to go to nap or watch the Brazil-Japan game, which seems to be exciting because Japan scored the first goal. But we need to be efficient, so we cannot make too many jokes. It's basically difficult for me because I will be trying to moderate two old friends that know each other for a long time, but I'll still try to ask questions. So we will have, for that fireside chat, Fatih Birol and François-Philippe Champagne. So please, if you want to join me on the stage.
It's always a good day when you have Fatih Birol in town, trust me.
No, thank you very much. Please.
Good. So thank you so much, Mr. Champagne, for joining us. We had a very interesting morning. Fatih Birol started the day with, by setting the stage on the energy scene, the worldwide energy crisis we're facing. It is a crucial time for energy and how we manage energy. Energy security issues are on top of mind of many countries. But yet, energy efficiency has to also make the headlines and has to be included in our energy policies. So I wanted to first ask and start the question, the panel with you, Minister Champagne, with how does Canada what role Canada can play in that energy scene, but also what's the challenge? We need to bring energy efficiency inside the discussion of energy supply. So how can we, what can we do, and how Canada is doing on these aspects?
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming to Montreal. Thank you to my friend Fatih. I said, thank you Fatih, because you were in town, they invited me. It's always good to be with Fatih on the stage. We've been knowing each other for a long time. Vous savez, à tous ceux qui sont francophones, c'est un plaisir de vous avoir à Montréal. Évidemment, quand on a l'imminence grise de l'énergie avec nous, c'est important de faire le point sur la situation comme vous l'avez fait. I just want to welcome you to Canada. I want to thank the International Energy Agency for selecting Montreal. I think it's one of your first meetings in America. So I just want to say thank you for choosing us. And I think, and you know what's interesting, I usually quote Fatih, so it's going to be interesting. He said he quotes me. So that's going to be an interesting discussion because Fatih is now, as you would appreciate, the nexus between food security, energy security, economic security, and national security is one. And as the former chair of the G7 finance minister and central bank governor in 2025, that was the year where I said we cannot let uncertainty become the new certainty. And we were looking at 2026, and I would say to all of you, I think what we've seen, 26 seems to be the year of volatility and complexity. And in a world like that, we wanted experts. Like now, you may know or not, but Fatih Birol is now part of our almost G7 meetings of finance minister and central bank governors. Why? Because he said it better than anyone. And I'll use my own word to refer to what Fatih said, but the world is witnessing the most significant reshaping of the energy architecture in human history, at least in recent human history. So where does that put Canada? Because actually, that was your question. Obviously, on energy efficiency, you've seen a major announcement today. But also, I think what people are looking for today, which is challenging, is trust and resiliency. People want to make sure they will find a trusted partner for the long term, and one which can provide energy security and resiliency in the supply chain. And I think in that, Fatih has been very generous in his words about Canada, that Canada stands out as an energy superpower, both in conventional but also renewable energy. And we have taken, and you've seen from the Prime Minister, the tone at the top has changed significantly. We intend to be a major producer of energy. We intend to do that sustainably, reliably, and I think the policies we have adopted in Canada are making a difference. And I can tell you, never like now, we have seen countries looking at Canada because you're talking about energy, but you're talking also all forms of energy, whether it's nuclear, whether it's renewable, in fact, hydroelectricity, whether you're looking at nuclear, which Canada is one of the very few countries in the world which can certify nuclear reactor. And I was just in Darlington last week, where we'll be the first G7 country to have a small modular reactor in operation. And we have all the critical minerals that are needed for the economy of the 21st century. So when people often say demography is destiny, I would put it to you that energy is destiny. And energy is becoming, particularly electricity, is becoming key because everyone is trying to decarbonize. Those who are going to have energy will be able to play a key role in the electric stack, and obviously play a key role when it comes to AI infrastructure. So when people say you always look confident and optimistic about the Canadian economy, is because I sit where Fatih sit when you're looking at the state of the world, whether it's the G7, OECD, the G20, you realize that Canada is going to be the trusted energy partner of the 21st century. And I'll stop there because one of the things we've seen is that geography doesn't tend to change much, and people don't change much either. So there was something in the FT recently, which you would have seen for sure. We're looking at the different straits in the world. I think there was 7 or 8, which could be choke point to global supply chain. And then you're looking at Canada in that context, and you say you have the energy, you have the resources. We've been blessed by geography next to the United States. We have 3 oceans. We have major infrastructure development to seize, and we can play a key role with our partners in Europe, but also to provide energy security to our partners in the Asia-Pacific region, whether it's Japan or South Korea. So the strategy we have put to double down and double the electric grid by 2050 was really, in my view, visionary at a time where the green electron is probably going to be making Canada with a competitive advantage in North America, particularly here. Fatih, you're in the province, Quebec, which has the greenest electricity grid, and I would say in North America in terms of its capacity and its infrastructure. It is the premium jurisdiction of the 60 jurisdiction you find here in North America. So we have a lot here in terms of talent, of resources, of expertise, and we intend to build on that to make sure we have prosperity for generations to come, and make sure we have the foundational energy infrastructure to lead in this very complex world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Birol. So just to continue and maybe to place energy efficiency in that context, what should we do more to basically make sure it's included in our in government's mind and in our policies?
So thank you very much, and it is really a great honor to be with the Mr. Minister. I follow the finance ministers around the world geographically and historically, so many years I know. So I think, as I told Mr. Prime Minister, I was 6 weeks ago, I was here again in Ottawa and Toronto. He has a wonderful team, and Mr. Minister is the best salesman of Canada, going around the world. So this is great. But I am not far from him in terms of selling the Canada. Not only Canada, but the principles. Because I call this current crisis as the largest energy crisis in the world, not necessarily in terms of the price effect, but in terms of the political effects. Many countries are now looking for other energy partners, alternative technologies, alternative trade routes, alternative companies to work with. I can explain you like this. In the past, as I am a country, I'm going to buy, I don't know, from another country, LNG, make an LNG contract, or I'm going to buy a nuclear technology. Normally, I ask, how much do you sell it? One of them says 5 euros, other one says 4 euros. Normally, I go and buy the 4 euro one, because it's cheaper, it's better for my economy. But now, if the country believes that the 5 euro one doesn't create any geopolitical threat. It is a predictable country. It's a country run by a rule of law, and the democracy is there. They can go for $5. So this is the new rule of the game. There is the energy security risk premium in all of them. And why I say Canada, because Canada is huge potential. Mr. Minister mentioned oil, gas, renewables, nuclear power, very important. Nuclear is making a comeback. Critical minerals, both in terms of mining, but now starting also the refining and processing, hydropower. And as I said this morning, AAA democracy, predictability, and everything is there. Now, what is needed is in Canada to be fast, to move. And I said similar things 6 weeks ago when I was here in Ottawa and also in Toronto. And within the 6 weeks, I met with many governments. And I know that many governments in the meantime knock on the door of Canada, and more will come. So therefore, it is, in my view, once in a lifetime opportunity for Canada to be a real energy export superpower. And if I was Canada, I will put the trust at the center of my export strategy. Yep. Of course, the quality of the gas, I don't know, the technological advancement of SMRs, these are all important things, but the trust should be there, and the predictability. Coming back to energy efficiency, I am very happy to be here, to be honest, in Montreal. Mr. Minister, I mentioned in the morning that one of the things which was very close between me and Montreal was Leonard Cohen. Mm-hmm. So when I was young, last year, so this is the Leonard Cohen was, I used Leonard Cohen a lot for going to dinners and all of these things. I admire him, but I am very happy that Montreal, a very important city in Canada, a major energy exporter, pays attention to energy efficiency. Definitely. Because when you look around the world, the countries who are the leaders in energy efficiency are the ones who are major energy importers, such as Korea, such as Japan, such as Europe. So I found it very interesting, very good, and it is the reason why we have chosen the Canada and Montreal. And the more efficient the Canadians use their energy, first, the more money remains in the pocket. Second, better for the environment. And third, you have more energy to export. So I think this is, in my view, a no-brainer. And in terms of Canada, this is if Canada is able to, and I believe, together with you, Mr. Minister, with Tim in the morning, we discussed with the Mark Carney and the others, you'll be able to do it. If you exert yourselves as a major exporting country in terms of small modular reactors, renewables, and others, this is good for everybody.
Totally.
I am thinking of the global energy markets, stability, and the betterment of this world. And I had the interview this morning with one of the major newspapers, and I told the lady who interviewed me, I am looking after the stability of the global energy markets, and I am very thankful to Canada, but I wish there were 3 Canadas. So my life will be a bit easier in that respect. But one is better than nothing, so thank you very much for doing your best, Mr. Minister. But in addition to, I'm also thankful that in addition to having these resources, you also pay attention to energy efficiency, using energy more efficiently, more productively.
It's very powerful what he said. I just, obviously you're there to ask the question, I'm told. but you know, when you have someone who has looked at the energy architecture of the world for the last 30 years and beyond, you still look very, that's why you say, like yesterday, Lord Cohen. But when you hear from someone like Fatih Birol, who said, the world energy architecture is changing, it won't look what we have, most of us in the room have seen as we see the world today. Canada has the fundamentals: stability, predictability, rule of law, possibilities, opportunities to play a big role. And not only just domestically. That's why I like to be with Fatih, because I think, Fatih, when you're in Canada, you take a few things for granted. You know, we assume these things, but now as the world is fast changing, more complex, the conflict in the Middle East, like I say, the geography, the reality on the ground, that's where you see that being an energy superpower, it's more than a brand. There's fundamentals behind it where you say, whether it's about conventional oil and gas, whether it's about LNG, whether it's about nuclear, whether it's about our critical minerals. I hope Canadians in the room listen, and the investors that are looking at Canada realize that the concept of energy security, I would say, and I'll stop there, but when I was foreign minister a few years ago, you would expect foreign minister to talk about national security. But now I would say, and Fatih has been at pretty much all our meetings of finance ministers in the last, we have 7 or 8 a year of the G7, and it's striking to me how much the world has changed in 10 years since I've been 10 years plus in politics, where now national security is pretty much everything we talk about. Because the nexus and the connection and the transmission, I'll really stop there, from what happened in the Middle East, which was an energy crisis, has become an affordability challenge in all G7 countries, whether it's the price of food, the price of gas, and the price of home. And it's even across all the G7, and I would say beyond. So, you know, that concept where you bring a new partner which has enormous capacity, capabilities, and is the envy in the world when it comes to the stability of the energy system. And now that we're doubling the grid, making sure our G7 partner would have access to critical minerals. Like you said, Fatih, we're really raising to our full potential in terms of helping with energy security in a very different architecture. And I'll just finish by saying, even those who produce in the Middle East, believe it or not, are calling us. They're saying, now, why don't we produce in your country so that we can even out in terms of the risk that you're seeing? Because again, these straits will continue to be what they are. You'll find a solution now, but you know, time will tell when's going to be the next one. And therefore, when you have access to three ocean and have no security issue, obviously, like you said, partners around the world looking at countries like Canada to play a much bigger role in the world energy architecture.
And also, what I would say is that even the Strait of Hormuz is open. It was a question many years in people's mind. Can this strait be closed one day? Now, some people like us, this idea, we said, be careful, it may be closed. But people said, are you fearmonger? And so, no, be careful, it may be closed. Now it is closed. Now, people will think, once it is closed, it can be closed again. So this is a very important change in the people's mind. We say in Turkish, the vase is broken. You know, you put the flowers. Once a vase is broken, you cannot put it back with the yoo-hoo, make it again. It's broken now. So therefore, people will look at alternatives for that. When you look at alternatives, of course, there may be alternative pipelines, this and that, but the most important thing is alternative suppliers, reliable suppliers here. And Canada appears to be a very strong candidate with everything you have. And in addition to the supplying to the existing your clients or the countries, I believe there will be many new markets open. One of them is we had this morning the Commissioner of Energy of Europe. Europe will be. I see many complementaries between Europe and Canada in this respect, because Europe has decided to phase out gas by 2027. How Europe is going to make it up, and I think their mind is to have a diversification to get the gas there, and Canada may play a role here.
So, as I said, it's so difficult to discuss energy efficiency in energy conferences because we're always triggered towards energy supply. Even in an energy efficiency conference, we go there. But the world...
It is your turn now, please go ahead.
You're supposed to ask the question, right? We're just supposed to answer.
No, but these are important topics, and of course, so one of the ways we make actually countries more energy secure and make countries more efficient is through electrification, because electro technologies, they allow industries, households, transportation to become more efficient, because intrinsically electricity allows more efficiency. But then, in order to have the adequate power supply for everyone, we need to invest in electrification. So my question, I want to change the discussion a little bit towards electrification. How do we build these power networks of the future, the one we will need to power our industries, companies, households? When we are at the level where we are now, we all know, grids are well behind in terms of where they should be. So how do governments work towards, creating the grid of the future that will make our economies more efficient? Mr. Champagne.
Well, first of all, if you look at Canada, and Fatih will know, most of our grid has been north-south for historical reasons. I think now the provinces and territories and the country, I would say, realize that we need to double down on east, west, and north. We need, because we have massive opportunities, for example, when it comes to mining and critical minerals in northern region. We have announced a significant revamping of modernization of equipment. Look at Hydro-Quebec. Listen, for those who are not familiar, you're in the province here, which is, I go to these international conferences, but the respect, the talent, the know-how of those who build these large dams in Quebec back in the 1970s or thereabout is still world-renowned today. Just look at Hydro-Quebec. They have a plan of revamping, Fatih, of $200 billion over the next 10 years. So those are the kind of massive investments. When our good friends, a good friend of mine was telling me today, you need the talent. We have the install base, but we need to modernize a number of equipment. We need to rethink the grid at a time where we need to think more on a national basis. You've been there as a professor. You know that we've been a great partner to the United States. I remind them all the time on the energy security front. We've been a great partner. Parts of New York is powered through electricity coming from Quebec, in fact. But now we're also at a time where if you look at the economy of the 21st century, which is going to be more digital, you're quite right that electrification and what I call the electric stack, those are going to play and I was the industry minister before this current role, and I can tell you, we were not the only jurisdiction, but we're one of them who at some stage had to say no to certain type of manufacturing because we just didn't have the electricity needed at the scale and time needed. And I'd like to say never again. Now we're going to be doubling down. I would tell for those who are looking at investment, if you look at the marginal effective tax rate, the famous meter, we're the lowest in the G7, 3% lower than the United States. If you look at the investments tax credits we have put, the family of tax credit is quite unprecedented, from hydrogen to electricity to manufacturing in the G7. And we have probably one of the largest, if not the largest, infrastructure plan in the G7. If you look at Germany, it was 500 billion euros over 12 years. Canada, Fatih, is 450 billion over 5 years on a cash basis. So one would argue we have the largest infrastructure build in the G7. So that's going to require a lot of capacity. But at the same time, I think, as Fatih said, this is a moment in history where I think you can look at the challenge. I tend to look at the opportunity. Countries, like you said, we're going to go at speed and scale to build these infrastructure are going to win in the digital economy of the 21st century because everything is tending to be electrified to reduce the carbon emission. And we start from a very strong position. We start from a leading position in many ways. And now, how do we extend that? I think there's a role for government. There's a role for the private sector as well. I think the way we have thought about, and I'll stop there, about public assets needs to be modernized. The Prime Minister and I were in Australia recently, and I was with Infrastructure Australia, and at some stage we need to modernize how we see the construction, operation, and maintenance of public assets? Does it need to be the government all the time? Can there be public-private partnership? I think there's an interesting model. And if you look at nuclear, and I'll really finish there, I mean, Canada is the only country, I would not say one of, but the only, in my personal opinion, and I've been in the energy sector, the private sector before, I have some of my colleagues in the room, where you have the talent, you have the EPCM firm, you have the OEM manufacturer, you have the fuel supplier, and you can do the decommissioning. To a point where I was saying, if you partner with industry, you can almost sell nuclear energy as a service if they have some countries who don't want to own the asset. Yep. Because now with the pension fund and what Fadi was saying, people wanting to invest in a place like Canada, we can bring our technology and our know-how into countries. Think about Eastern Europe. Think about a number of countries who have looked at the CANDU reactors, which are in a number of different countries. But I think that's where you start with what you have here, but I think there's enormous opportunities for us to play a key role. And like you say, that's a long tail. When you go in these projects, there are decades in terms, and I think it's kind of a revamp. I come from a generation where I think we thought electricity was endless. When you're in the province of Quebec, Fadi, trust me, when you raise as a kid, my father always say, close the lights. But very difficult for a teenager at the time to believe that there's a cost to that. And now we have come to a point to realize that, there's a limit to what we have, and we need to, like you said, be more energy efficient. I think Fadi said it. The most cost-effective energy is the one you don't have to consume, or the one you can save. So there's energy efficiency, but there's also an installed capacity in this country, Fadi, which is should be an inspiration and a model for many. And I think with the pension funds we have, the know-how, the capabilities, we can really play a big role in terms of the energy efficiency and bringing our expertise and know-how that you've been writing about. That we have one of the very few jurisdictions who can boast to have done hydroelectricity, for example, back in decades, and now needs to modernize, but with a very strong install base.
And I would also say a few things on electrification. What I said 2.5 years ago, François-Philippe, the world is entering the age of electricity. What does it mean, and why I said it? Because when I look at the numbers, global energy demand is growing, but global electricity demand is growing 3 times faster than the energy demand. There are some additional new determinants there, and one of them is very important for this country, namely artificial intelligence and data centers. Just to make all of us understand, data centers need a lot of electricity. A medium-sized data center consumes electricity as much as a town with 100,000 households. And they are now not medium, huge data centers are built around the world, and they need 24/7 electricity. Now, why I am saying this? Going one step up. In my view, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technological innovation of the human history up to now. And whoever wins the AI race wins the geopolitical upper hand. And the technology companies will choose as a destination those countries where they can have 24/7 electricity, a lot of electricity, and cheap electricity. When you look at all of this together, I think Canada provides an incredible opportunity for many, many countries and companies. So from that angle, we will see how the world will generate this electricity. And here, in addition to the, of course, renewables, solar and wind, very important, but I see the nuclear power is making a very strong comeback. I think the AI race and data centers will trigger, the small modular reactors will be cost-effective and come to the markets faster than many people think. And you are coming first here, Canada, but other countries, of course, are in the race. So think of all of those things. Electrification is, in my view, not only important for the improving efficiency, if you choose the right technologies, good for addressing the climate change, but it is, in my view, a geopolitical instrument, electrification. In the future, not today, but 10 years from now, when you ask me, is the energy more expensive? You ask me today, I will say the Brent is $75. But 10 years from now, I will tell you whether the energy prices are high or not. Electricity is 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The unit will change from barrel of oil to the cent per kilowatt hour. This will change because electricity is coming very strong. We will still need oil, we will still need gas, but the electricity is coming very strongly. AI, one thing, electric cars, electrification, transportation sector. I mean, go to Asia. I'm not talking China, East Asia. Indonesian president was in France only a few weeks ago. We had a dinner, President Macron, Indonesian president. He told me, I mean, he's right. People are not buying in that part of the world electric cars because of climate change, because it's $5,000. $5,000, and they have their entire system, the IT system there in the car, their home heating or cooling, their email system and everything there, and $5,000, and it goes. And the internal combustion engine exporters there in the region, big ones, G7 countries, are facing a huge challenge there, and even some of the European car manufacturers are facing big challenges. So electrification is coming. It will improve the energy efficiency, but it will also make the countries who can produce a lot of electricity and affordable prices and very quick is important, because today, if you decide to build a gas-fired power plant, in many of the countries, if you order your gas turbine today, you will get it 6-7 years of time. But in other countries, in Asia, for example, you get it in six months. So there is a big race among the countries, electrification, which is, among other things, driven by the AI race, which is, in my view, a big determinant for the economy and also geopolitics.
Can I say words of wisdom from Fatih always? And,
Go ahead.
you know, when you listen to Fatih, you could listen to him the whole day. But I think what you're challenging the audience is, with general purpose technology, you have to think exponentially.
Exactly.
And human nature thinks in a linear fashion. And I often say that I'm 56. If you had told me at 20 that my daughters would have a phone that she could take in her hand, that she would see someone on something that obviously I didn't know at the time, FaceTime, where you could see the face of someone, she could spend a day on it, and would barely cost anything. I'm of the generation of what we call long-distance calls, where every minute was metered, and she could have her friends in South Korea and spend a day on it, and the marginal cost is, I don't want to say zero, but it's very, very limited. And I think the biggest challenge you put to the world, to all of us as leaders, and when I say that, it's the people in the room, is how do you think exponentially when you think about the electric stack and the electric future that we're going to see? You have to think exponentially, and that is a real challenge for humans, because typically we assume the world to go on a linear basis. You know, you think about incremental change. And the last one we saw was perhaps like COVID. I was minister at the time where people in Wuhan was kind of the first thing we saw, and experts were saying, be careful because you have to think exponentially. And you know, at the time, I'm not saying with the benefit of insight, now we can see, but at that time, Fatih, those of us who were sitting in these meetings were like, okay, it's manageable, you know, it's gonna be, you know, you just stop a few things and it's gonna go back, the genie's getting back in the bottle. Now, obviously, when you look at that, with the eyes of today, you say, wow, that was much faster, much broader, much more impactful than any of us could probably imagine. The black swan, everyone know there would be one coming. No one saw the extent and the timing of it. But I just want to say what Fadi is giving us and the world as a challenge is almost like to think exponentially where the world's going to be on the basis of what you're seeing today. You know, you had electricity, you had the internet, now you have AI as the general purpose technology. And if you look at the history of humankind, just think about electricity going back to when it was, and where's the value creation? I'll stop there because the value creator in the room, the value creator is not necessarily just in generation, but it's the electric stack. That's where you want to play because the value creation is not necessarily what's in the, you know, people say in the socket, but it's the fact that you could plug a motor, you could plug other things which obviously have brought the value to these countries. And I think in that sense, Canada is uniquely placed to seize that mega trend. You always have to look at the mega trend if you want to seize, you know, opportunities, and I think this is one of them.
One of the best things for me to be in the same panel with the Mr. Minister is I understand better myself what I try to say. So this is very good.
You see, you didn't have a tough. You didn't sign up for an easy job.
Yeah,
having two of us here. You know, you didn't sign up for an easy job.
I want to challenge you on something because yes, we should think exponentially. We want more electrification, but you know, when we add more power supply, more transmission lines, when we upgrade the distribution system, it costs more. And we've seen infrastructure costs; they don't go down; they tend to go up. So we need to price things accordingly. At one point, you know, we cannot subsidize the grid infinitely. And you mentioned, both of you mentioned, we need affordability. We need to have cheap power to get the industries, but at the same time, it will cost more. So
efficiency is the
efficiency,
answer.
but then that's how we can manage the bill. We can manage the bill through efficiency for consumers, but the actual cost per kilowatt hour can barely go down when we add the additional cost of generation. You both mentioned nuclear power, and it's great that Canada is developing additional nuclear power, but when we look at the cost and dig, you know, it's not the cheapest electricity that we find that will be built, at least the initial SMRs that we will build won't be the cheapest. So and then to add complexity, if we want to incentivize energy efficiency, we should not have the lowest prices because people won't make the investment in energy efficiency if they see cheap prices because it won't make it worth.
But may I say something? I mean, if I can challenge you, I mean, you can improve energy efficiency two ways. One through prices, as you said. But the other one is with the norms and standards and the regulations. I give you one example, which really it's completely it is impossible if you look at the numbers. If I ask you one question, I mean, global electricity demand is skyrocketing, almost exponentially. And what is the single biggest driver of global electricity consumption growth in the world? And you would be surprised what it is. It is the industrial motors, the AI, electric cars, none of them. It is the exponential increase of sales of air conditioners in the world. Why? Because of the following. Let's say we talk about Asia, let's take Japan. In Japan, 90% of the households have an air conditioner, but Indonesia, 18%, India, 20%. I don't know, Nigeria 5%. With the increasing income levels and the increasing temperature, people buy air conditioners. And more air conditioners means higher electricity consumption. Now, the problem is the following. In Indonesia or India, an average air conditioner, to provide the same comfort compared to Japan, they use 3 times more electricity. Because there is no norms or standards or regulation. I mean, it is wasted. If you have the right the air conditioner, you have to build less power plant there and have the same comfort. So sometimes people may think energy efficiency is not seen, it is empty, or it's abstracting. It is not abstract. It is very concrete. If you have the right the air conditioner boxes there, you basically build less power plants. So from my point of view, pricing is one issue, but today in many countries, this is what we are doing at the IEA. This is our main thing, going to countries, Africa, Asia, try to get the best practices from the countries who put policies in place to apply those policies for air conditioners, for refrigerators, so that electricity consumption growth is not artificial. So pricing is, you are right, it should be underpriced, but also having the right standards and norms are also very important.
But you saw it in Canada with heat pumps. I mean, you know, Fatih, here you're in one of the country where the amplitude of temperature, today you're lucky. It's one of the nicest summer that we had. But Montreal would be, you know, depending on the day, you could go to minus 25. So we're a country of 50 degrees of amplitude on a 12 months basis. So in countries like us, the heat pump are really making a difference because obviously you can use them in both seasons. And I think there's a role for government because there's the short term, the midterm, the long term. Over the long term, as Fatih said, you win. In our case, we've been incentivizing Canadians to switch to more efficient form of heating in a way and cooling, depending where you are. But in some region of the country, believe it or not, I know people think Canada is cold, but I thought I saw a statistic that in Ontario people spend more on air conditioning than on heating on a yearly basis. So people forget that summers are hot and tend to be hotter as we go forward. So you have a role for government to do that, but also I think, to your point, I think I agree obviously with Fatih on standards, but I think scale will matter as well. I mean, we've seen it with other form of generation where you have a larger scale, small modular reactor, you're right, we're gonna be the first one to have one in commercial operation. But think about what this can unlock, and I think Pierre Graton is here from the mining industry. Imagine when you can bring power to the mine directly without having to build the infrastructure necessarily to bring the power, you know, to bring the transmission lines and be able to have like a small modular reactor that we're going to be able to build, and the technology development around that, and just think around the world. I'm just thinking in the Canadian context, but there's a lot of projects which are not bankable today because bringing energy to these projects, especially in a country as vast as Canada, and with the weather patterns that we have in the northern part, the moment you're going to be able to bring energy to these communities and these sites, this is a game changer when you say, where are you going to want to source your critical minerals down the road? And I think critical minerals are akin to oil in the 21st century. Exactly. You know, oil was the key defining, I think, but Fatih would say that better than me, in the 20th century, those who have and have not. I would bet it to you that critical minerals will be like that in the 21st century because we realize how dependent we are in terms of not only exploration and extraction, but refining which, exactly. You know, Fatih and I sit at the same table, say that's really the key area where we need to focus. Obviously, having the resources is something. Being able to refine it will be making us more resilient. And I agree with him on the price point. I think we've moved from a world which was just at efficiency and looking more at resiliency and proximity. I can tell you, I was with some OEM in the US, Fatih, you'd smile, because we were looking at a map and they said, you know what I like about Canada is proximity. Proximity to resources, assembly line, and market. And one said, you know, Minister, if things go wrong, I can always, you know, have a van go across the border. If things go really wrong, I'll go myself with a pickup truck. and it just to embody, you know, when you look at energy today and the critical supply chain, we've lived it to COVID, and we understand how, you know, I'll give you the Strait of Hormuz as bring, you know, helium, for example. And helium is obviously very consequential for the production of semiconductors. But what I was saying in these meetings, what I'm concerned is the unknown, is the cumulative impact of secondary assessment we may have, and how this leads us to a more challenging world. And that's why resiliency, where you started, and efficiency is part of resiliency. Because if you're more energy efficient, you're going to be more resilient, and use these precious electrons, in this case that we're talking about, to attract investment, to be more competitive, and to decarbonize at the same time. So as Fatih said, this is the electric economy, if I want to say, where we're going to play a key role here in the country, but also internationally with our partners.
So these will have to be the last words because we are at the end of our
Already,
fireside chat.
we were
Yes.
ready
We just
to go. I
started.
mean,
We are
I know,
just
sorry. Thank you so
warming up.
much, Mr. Champagne and Mr. Birol. Thank you very much. If you want to join
merci
me.
à vous. Merci à vous.
Très bien fait. Très bien fait.
Merci tout le monde.